Hi, everybody, and thank you so much for joining me. This is Sally Talk, and I am back. I know I took a couple weeks off, and that was because I traveled with my company to Dallas, and that was really fun, and got to see my team in Dallas. And then I've been working on my website, so if you heard my little announcement I did yesterday, I just did a quick little announcement and talked about my new website. So please go on my Facebook page and on Instagram, and you click in bio, and then you'll see my new website. But I'm really I'm doing this, so I've put my, I'm doing what I'm supposed to do. So I got my website going, and then this way you can go to my Arbonne website from it. You can see what speaking topics that I will do, because I'm kind of launching the speaking career, and then the podcast. So if you have any interest, or if you think that I could be a good speaker for some event or something you have coming up, please let me know. Before I get started with my wonderful guest, I do want to before I monetize, which I will monetize. So at some point you'll probably hear me pitching. I'm not going to pitch anything I don't believe in, but probably insurance or something at some point. Right now, since my sponsor is my business, for the last 39 years, almost 40 in January, which is exciting. My company, Arbonne International, which I've been with for 22 years, has always thought about you, the environment, the animals, which we're going to talk about today. Our founder, Peter Mark, was a member of PETA, and he had been in the skincare business for a while, and one of the things that really bothered him was animal testing. And he knew that animal testing, the only reason they were doing it was because they knew they needed to make a lot of money. They'd make up big batches of products and put it in the warehouse. And they had to make sure it was safe for humans to have that amount of preservative. So literally the testing on the animals was to see the profits. It was really to work the profits. So whenever you hear the stories of the mascara in the bunny's eyes or anything like that, it was just for preservatives. So since he figured out a way that we could make our products, and then we could ship them out to, through a distribution center and not have a warehouse. And so that made it so that it was okay with the FDA for us not to have the preservative. And then, so that's how it works. So the way we do business is actually helped it so that we didn't have to do any animal testing at all. And also we don't use any animal byproducts, which there's a lot of animal byproducts in skincare, and you can Google rendering plants. So anyway, the animals are very important with Arbonne, and we feel very strongly that we shouldn't use them as a commodity or use them as a byproduct and then use them to test unless it's absolutely necessary, and that's a whole other conversation, but not testing them to see how many preservatives you can put in your product. So that's the end of my pitch. So if you want any more information, you can click on my new website and scroll down, and my Arbonne link is there. Sally Holiday, Arbonne International, making the world a healthier place, one person at a time by helping the animals. Okay, Christy. So Christy Schilling is here, and I know that if you're a regular listener, I've had quite a few guests who are from this networking group that I'm in, but the networking group is called WIN, and it's really wonderful, and there's just a lot of really interesting people in the group, and we do have some men, but I've just been really impressed with a lot of the women that are in our group, and a lot of the things that they're doing, and what businesses, how passionate they are. And Christy is our sponsor. We have a charity sponsor, I guess that's how you say it, like a charity that we represent, and our proceeds go to at every meeting. And then I'm going to host an event with her on Sunday. We'll talk about that. But she's with Bark Avenue Foundation, and she's going to talk about what it is. So I'm just going to get right to it instead of my trying to tell when I have you here. I always hate it when they have these people that go into this whole long thing trying to say what you do, and you're sitting here. So I might as well have you. So anyway, thanks for coming by. I'm so happy you're here.
Thank you so much, Sally. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah. And we got together and we sat and we were like, oh, what can we do together? And we had that coffee, and I was like, oh my gosh, she's really fun. She has to be on my podcast.
Well, thank you. Again, I do appreciate it. It's a wonderful podcast. I've listened. So
good.
I'm honored to be a selected
she's a
guest.
Listener.
Yes.
I didn't know. That's awesome. What is your, so what is it? Like, how did you get in? How did you do this? Like, you're always been I know you're vegan.
I am vegan.
What is it about animals that you said, this is something I want to, or how did it all start?
It's evolved. I mean, it has been, a long process. And I think with anything, when you sort of dip your toe in, you either, continue to maybe dip your toe in and dabble a little bit, or sometimes you just jump in and swim it out. And
right.
And so it's really become a whole, part of my life. So I really do try to live my life completely cruelty free and, try to take everything into consideration, people, pets, and the environment. So, but it really started from a young age in terms of, I would say, volunteerism has always been a big part of my life. My parents have always instilled it in me. And animals just went along with it. I was the kid, that brought things home, or, that found a cat and was like, there's a cat on the street and we need to do something about that kind of thing. And ironically, I was thinking about this. My dad is ill, and just thinking about sort of, life as a child and growing up with him. And I used to love the telethons, if anybody's old enough to remember telethons.
Yeah, me too.
And actually telethons have come back a little bit with a lot of our natural disasters, but Jerry Lewis, ironically. Yes. And I was a kid
Labor
that
Day.
Got up early in the mornings on the weekend, and there really wasn't anything to do. There were no, all these video games, it just wasn't any of that. And so I would put on telethons, and I got an allowance. I got $5 a week, and I called in and gave my allowance. And I'll never forget my dad handing me a $20 bill. And he said, because that $5 for you is very hard to earn, right? It takes me a while. All week takes me $5 to earn.
Yeah.
And you were willing to be, generous and give that. And so here's $20 for what you did. And I thought, wow, like it was a wonderful lesson, though, in earning money and how valuable it is, especially the longer it takes you to earn it. So then to give it away, is something special. And he really instilled that in me. And then, just growing up, we always had pets and, again, took in sort of what was ever out there. And then when I turned 18, I went to college. And I had a class that was a health class, actually, but they showed a video on factory farming, and that was it. And I became a vegetarian that day. And then veganism followed, because I had someone essentially ask me, why do I wear leather belts and shoes, and why do I do, some other life choices, cosmetic, whatever it might be.
Yeah.
And basically called me a hypocrite. And I kind of said, you know what? You're absolutely right. And I went vegan that day, and that was about 15 years ago at this point.
Wow. Was your family, when you decided you were going to be vegetarian, did your family all of a sudden you came home and you're like, that's it, I'm not having any?
Yes, and it was right before Thanksgiving, ironically. It was in October. I remember it because I remember my mom being like, what are you going to eat for Thanksgiving? And it was like, there's a lot. I mean, I've always been one of those people, though, too, that actually like all the sides, right? I love potatoes and, the stuffing and the carrots and the salad and, whatever the other traditions are. And really, you can make an amazing vegan spread for Thanksgiving. And that's always what I do. I usually have, if my family's not in town, I'll actually do it on Thanksgiving with sort of, people who might not have families or places to go, friends, that family maybe are not in town, and I'll have them, for dinner, or I'll do it the Saturday after. And I ask nobody to bring anything because I want them to just be guests and enjoy it. And I don't want people to worry and think, how do I make it vegan? And I just want to show the flavor and the beauty of a vegan meal.
Yeah. And now it's really, what's great is, as much as we like to think we can tell people what to do, it's true. It's really the dollars help that. You know, people spending money and then it becoming a a worthwhile business. Now so many people and so many businesses are starting to offer the vegan alternatives because they know there's money to be made.
Sure.
And that's really how it works.
It is.
And it's important that you're careful about where you spend your dollars and with the companies that are actually seeing it as an important thing. And even if it's like we've talked about this before, even if everybody just limited or cut back their meat consumption, it would make a huge difference.
Absolutely.
With the environment and with just how the animals are treated.
Yes. And I think people don't realize that too. You know, a lot of people think, oh, you're, this animal rights, this, really out there kind of person. And it's more than just the animals. So like you said, it's about our environment a lot now. I mean, that's a huge part of it. And then if you really look at the rest of the world and how we can, how many people are going hungry and how we could feed far more people if instead of, these giant factory farms and feedlots, if those were, grains and vegetables, a lot more people on our planet could be fed as well. So, it may have started out about the animals, but it's a whole host of impact now on our planet.
I've always thought that if somebody came down from like Mars and we had to explain how we treat animals, it would be horrifying. Like if you really think about it from in all aspects of it.
Sure, absolutely.
How we don't even know what we're eating. We could eat from 30 different cows. It's just the way it's treated and how it's really would be horrifying. And if we lowered the consumption, that way everybody could modify and make things a lot more humane,
right? Absolutely.
So how did you end up getting involved with is that how you saw like the problem with the dogs in the shelters and everything else?
No, it was separate. They were kind of separate entities. I mean, I obviously see it all together now, but it was sort of bits and pieces and just learning, right? I learned about factory farming and then became a vegetarian. With animals, like I said, just always as a kid, but then my background is social welfare. So I also, obviously cared about people and helping them as well. So I, was a pregnant and parenting teen counselor. I worked in domestic violence. I worked with the mentally ill. And sadly, those are difficult groups to work with, and there are far more challenges than at 21 and 22 that I was really capable. I got a college degree, but it certainly doesn't prepare you for what these people need, and not just my age or even just a degree. There are so many other factors. I mean, socioeconomic factors. They're just personal lifestyles. Finance. I mean, I could go on and on. They're really their problems need to be solved on a whole other level, and I just didn't feel like I was making the impact, I could, or that I wanted to. And I had a 12-year-old pregnant client who I did in-home counseling. So I was going into homes, and they had this tiny 8-week-old Rottweiler puppy named Flash. And they told me they were going to, let the puppy out on the street. And this was in Van Nuys. And that just sounded extremely odd to me, right? And you're just going to open up your door and like let an 8-week-old puppy run, free.
Right.
And I just said, it was a Monday, and I said, please, can you keep the puppy till Friday? I will figure it out. And, I started to call animal rescue groups, and Actors and Others for Animals was the one who ultimately took the dog. And why they were going to let the dog out is they couldn't afford the medication, and they really didn't even know what was wrong with the dog. They said, it has a problem on its nose, and I would learn later that it would be mange and very treatable. But again, if you don't have money to feed your family, certainly buying, medication for a puppy is out of sorts. And they didn't even consider, an animal shelter. They just thought, well, we'll just let her out. So I kept my promise. They kept their promise. And I did pick up the dog, and Actors and Others for Animals, took in the dog. And then my husband and I, we were engaged at the time and, had just bought our first home, and we had a dog brought to us by the name of Blossom that was at a shelter and was going to be killed. And the people who saved the dog were just visiting the shelter. I don't know why you would just like visit a shelter without volunteering, right? Well, or without volunteering or having a plan maybe to get a pet or, but they were just in the neighborhood. But she was 3 months old and they just couldn't believe that, she was going to be euthanized. So they took her, but really didn't have a place for her. So we, took her in, and I had worked for a person for a while, like between college while I was at college, actually, because I was her personal assistant and she would always work with sort of my school schedule and things like that. And she was an attorney and very active in animal welfare in terms of donations and things. Mm-hmm. And so I learned about, a couple organizations I hadn't heard of from her. And like I said, once you sort of start, so then I was driving places and would find animals on the street and then try and get them. And, so one thing really just led to another. And then I was deciding to move from the not-for-profit world and into the profit world. And it just wasn't setting right, that sort of change. Again, not feeling like now I was, selling out and not making an impact. And so I decided to volunteer quite a bit. And I found the Lang Foundation. And so I was going to the West Side to volunteer with them. And then I was realizing, well, it's a lot of time in the car that I actually could be spending if I found, a local organization.
Right.
I would spend far less time in the car and could spend far more time helping and being with the animals. And of course, my husband came along with all of these volunteer activities because they were now often on the weekends since, I was working. And we got involved very heavily with Best Friends Animal Society. And so we started volunteering with them. And of course, the more we did, then the more they were much more grassroots at the time. I mean, I've been doing this now for 25 years. So just animal welfare in general, it moved into advocacy and law and legislation, and I could go on and on about all the things I've been doing. But we did drive 38 animals from the Baldwin Park shelter to Utah because a lot of small dogs are still being euthanized in our shelters, and there's shelters in other states that have waiting lists for small dogs. So my husband and I took a road trip and drove 38 dogs to safety. How did
you drive 38 dogs? Was it
it was through Best Friends. So at the time, again, remember I was probably 35 at the time. So yes. So at the time, well, now there's funding for these types of transports, right. And there's actual, people who get paid to do it, and their vehicles are very tricked out and things. But it was a van with stacked crates with bungee cords and the whole bit. And they're small dogs, so you can put a couple in a crate and stack them up, and that's kind of how we did it. And I was extremely nervous about it, but it's surprising at first. It's very stressful, and at first it's very loud, and then it just quiets down as you sort of drive the 6 or whatever hours it was, because we drove to Georgetown, St. George, Utah, and then the Humane Society of Salt Lake City meets you. So then you actually let all those dogs out, give them potty breaks and a little bit of food and water, and they have water in their crates, of course, but and then we reload them up on their vehicles, and they take them the rest of the way.
Wow,
and then there's a waiting list of people so they really do pretty much go right into homes.
Wow, That's so interesting.
Yeah.
Huh. So once you saw that there were so many animals in the shelter, you did the math, and you thought, if they were spayed or neutered, right? Then you wouldn't have this issue.
Yes.
There wouldn't be such a big population.
Much of what I have been doing has been in really the rescue side of animal welfare. So my whole first, 15 to 20 years was definitely in rescue. I mean, we helped with fundraising events. We ran mobile adoptions, even started my own not-for-profit. And when we did that, that's actually more when I went into advocacy, and the puppy mill industry was definitely a big impact. Many people were buying animals, and then if it didn't work out, those animals were ending up in our shelter, or those pets are being purchased. Those are, sort of taking animals away from our shelters. So I went into a lot of advocacy and trying to get our laws changed. And we did get the ban to stop the sale of mill animals passed in Glendale. They were, I think, the 30th city to do that before the whole state, passed the law that Governor Brown signed. And then I partnered with another person, and we got the same ban passed in Burbank. So that's when things shifted a lot to advocacy.
Just explain that a little bit more, just so people don't understand what that actually was.
So California now has the law that pet stores, as they once were known, pet stores used to sell animals. I mean, they came from puppy mills, and they were, shipped over on, semis and things like that to the various stores that would sell them. They'd buy them for maybe $100, and then they'd sell them for hundreds or even thousands of dollars. And it's big business. It's just like factory farming, right? It's about, profit. It's all about profit. And a lot of these animals are sick. They're kept in wire cages. They are treated like a farm animal in terms of their care and what's required, and it's very limited. They're in, wire coops essentially, and often don't ever touch grass. And they don't get medical care, veterinarian care and all these things. And they live that way their entire lives. The puppies are sold, the moms, are kept like that. And it's very tragic. And then, and those are the animals that were sold in those stores. So in Glendale, there was a store in the Glendale Galleria that was very popular. In Burbank, there was a store called Peggy Woods that had been in business. It was a family-run pet store. And, the reality is everybody was making money, but these animals were very sick and not well cared for. And even if these animals that were being sold didn't have genetic issues or ailments, certainly their parents and their siblings were suffering from that. So it's something that when I actually moved to Glendale, there was a store a couple blocks away from my house in Kenneth Village that was selling animals from mills, puppy mills. And it made me sick to live that close. And so I went to the owner with a girlfriend of mine. I said, please come. And he said he wasn't selling that. That's not where they came from. And I said, it is where they come from. That's just where they
come from.
Well, a lot
breeders.
Of pet stores claim, right, local breeders and things like that. And that's just not reality. And so at the time, again, I was still volunteering quite a bit with Best Friends, and they had this campaign, this, puppies aren't product campaign and no more puppy mill campaign kind of thing. And so I said, you guys have to help me. We have to show this man that we know where, and they did. They had video footage of literally the mills where he in particular and many others would, buy them. And so he really woke up and wanted to change. And so he was a business owner in Glendale and was willing to help me go to the city and get that law changed. So he changed his whole business model, which is the business model many use today, which is the rescue only business model. So if you are a pet store, you can adopt animals out. They just must be from an animal shelter, rescue, things like that. They cannot be from, backyard breeders or puppy mills or things like that.
Oh, okay.
And so
really cool.
The idea, it was always the goal to get, of course, every state to pass this law, but it wasn't happening. And so the whole goal of this campaign was to kind of do it community by community, very grassroots, city by city. Mm-hmm. And so I don't even remember the first. I might have even been West Hollywood, might have been the first city. But essentially, once the first couple happened, then the ordinance was kind of, could just be copied, and kind of the new community city could just be replaced.
Right. Once the precedent is set. Yeah,
exactly.
It's easy for everyone to jump on.
Exactly. So one by one, city by city, and I don't know, I know they got up to 60 cities, but ultimately, and then once you get that sort of momentum, right, then you could put it before the state and how the state ultimately passed that
So how many
law.
states now in the United States do you have any idea?
I don't.
I was just curious.
I don't. And
That's really interesting. I think that I knew about puppy mills, but I guess I didn't realize that it went to the. No, I guess I didn't really realize that. You know, what's interesting is that what would make them think that if they mistreat the mother and father that make the puppy that they're going to sell, how is that going to be a healthy puppy? You know, and I mean, it's so strange because that's a pregnant dog, right? Making puppies. You'd have to, I mean, it's really crazy.
It's a numbers, right? A numbers game. There's so many, and it's more about, if you just keep having lots or have lots of dogs that have lots, and you lose some along the way. I mean, it's supply and demand, right? It's that whole mentality of mass production,
that's the problem.
And then you can lose some product, right? I mean, if we're talking about, cosmetics or things like that. But when you're talking about lives and, we've become, kind of this disposable society a bit.
Yeah, and so. Definitely desensitized. And also it's all behind the curtain.
Right.
And you don't really realize that. I was like using the Matrix, when you take the red pill and all of a sudden your eyes are opened. It's like the owner.
Yeah.
Now all of a sudden he's like, well, now I can't do this anymore.
Sure.
Because now I know.
Right.
And he just didn't know.
And
I'm
someone
sure
brought it
quit.
before him,
And they weren't one to want to show him. They were probably making it look like it was all fine, and he'd get these little puppies and it'd be fine. So I'm just curious, and we can get, because I want to talk about bark, but how do the breeders fit into this? Because there are still people that breed animals. So do they have to be qualified to show that they're in a humane setup and things like that?
There are very few reputable breeders. Reputable breeders are really going to care about the mother and the father.
Right.
They're only going to breed a certain amount. They care about the genetics. They don't want the gene pool disrupted. They're going to want to know where their puppies are going. It's going to be much more like a process of adopting from a rescue. You're going to fill out an application. Yeah. You're going to sign a contract. They would certainly want these animals fixed because, again, they don't want you sort of dabbling in that gene pool, right? They don't want you to buy 2 puppies and then mate them and, things like that, because again, they care generally, reputable breeders, and it's a very small percentage, and you will pay a lot of money,
right? Because
it's not about money to them. It is about the breed, the love of the breed, and the carrying on of the good genes and that line,
right?
And the biggest problem, I would say, now is definitely what would be referred to as a backyard breeder. But I think people don't realize backyard breeding isn't necessarily like a big business, although it probably could be, and in some cases it is. But it's kind of just that neighbor of yours that has an unfixed dog, and maybe their friend has an unfixed dog, or they love their dog so much and they want it to have puppies. And it's those kinds of things now, I think, that are a big problem, because what happens is you mate those 2 and they have puppies, and you think, oh, and I have homes for all of them because I'm going to give them away to my friends and my neighbors. But that giving away without everybody being fixed then just creates more and more and more and more. And
so now here we come into
again, those aren't purebreds, right? That's just, again, that's really backyard breeding. That's being, irresponsible. And by giving those dogs away, or cats, or, whatnot, it is taking the home of maybe a dog or cat that's in a shelter or a rescue.
Right.
So, I mean, if everyone went to a shelter or rescue, when you adopt from there, they're already fixed. They're already vaccinated. I mean, you're getting a great deal because everything's already taken care of. There are huge benefits to spay and neuter in terms of health, right? It prevents many things, behavioral issues. It prevents some cancers. It definitely prevents pyometria, which is infection in the uterus of a female dog or cat, which is life-threatening and very expensive. So, it really just makes makes sense.
Yeah, that's it. That's really interesting, because the backyard breeders are the ones, and they give out 15 dogs in the course of doing all this over the course of several litters or whatever. Then you have half of those get either dropped off at the shelter, let go, right? And then they go off and then they breed, and then they make more. Have they made, so this is the thing that you're offering. So tell me a little bit about Bark. So where did Bark come from?
So Bark Avenue Foundation, I started volunteering with about 3 years ago, and a year in, I was offered the executive director role, which they didn't have, and the organization was sort of turned over to me, which has been a challenge and a huge honor. But what I like about Bark Avenue and what's different from in the past is, instead of focusing on the rescue piece, right, the sort of aftermath, if you will, it's trying to prevent the problem before it starts. So it's really focusing on spay and neuter, humane education, and then we also help unsheltered people and their pets stay together. But the whole goal is to prevent animals from being born on the streets and entering in our shelters with outcomes that are generally, not positive. I mean, if they're born on the streets, I mean, it's a challenging life, to say the least.
And also,
obviously,
they're going to end up in the shelter, and that's a bizarre. That's like when I was saying, like talking to the Martian. It's like, oh yeah, we have these animals, and then they have them on the streets, and then they get picked up by and then they get destroyed. It's like,
yeah, they can, yeah, and that's
strange.
A reality, because there's so many. And so what we try to do is stop the problem before it starts, allowing the animals in the shelters that are already there, more time, because, the shelter should be a place for animals to go when there is real need, right? When there is a natural disaster or something, out of the ordinary happens, or their person passes away.
Right. Like
exactly.
That. Yeah.
Exactly. Not to be a housing, facility for just discarded animals that people no longer want. I mean, so many times, I cannot tell you, people will literally bring in their senior pet that is, on its last few months or something, and will pick up a puppy, the same day, in the same moment. Oh, here, this dog's old. I don't want this anymore. It doesn't play with my children now. We want to get a puppy, and that's just so tragic. Again, that sort of idea of disposability, Yeah. I mean, I could tell you, things that...
Chap, my dog, he was dropped off by his family in the shelter. And we don't understand. We never really got the whole story when we rescued him. And we rescued him from a place that was and then they had to move because they were on Ventura Boulevard. It was called Lucky Puppy.
I know
really
Lucky Puppy.
Sweet. Yeah. I think we talked about this.
Yes.
And they were great in the neighborhood, because if anybody got lost, you could drop it off at Lucky Puppy, because they would post it on Facebook, and then they could get their dog back. And they were really being like a good neighbor. And then,
like a shelter, that's the idea too of a shelter, what it should be, right? Yeah, that if something happens, an animal gets out, so you have a place to find your pet.
Yeah, exactly, without the risk of your pet being, because nobody picked it up and you didn't know it was there or whatever. So they had rescued him out of the shelter, and they said he had just been dropped off, and he was sad when we rescued him. We had him here for the first, at least, and we still think he still has a little bit of it residual, because he worries when we leave, and he will sit on the sofa and look out the door, and wait for his buddies to come back, because he loves my boy so much. But he would sit and look at me, and I would just be like, "You're sad, aren't you? You just really your family. You're wondering when they're coming back." And so now we've had him. It'll be, it's 4 years, end of this year. And I think he's, finally, like, we're his family.
Sure.
But I can't even imagine dropping off an old dog that had been in, but I mean, I know, I'm sure there's just, and I know horror stories of people finding animals underneath car wheels, tied. to the house after they move out, just tied to the tree.
Or just tied, at a pole outside a Home Depot. And, it's sad because there are, I see a lot of situations where, a person falls on hard times, medical issues, things like that. But I do think that there's this idea that pets are disposable. And I think people really need to go in with the idea that, pets are part of our family. It's a lifetime commitment for the lifetime, of the pet. If you're going to move, you need to, get permission. But I will also say on the flip side, so many places do not still allow animals, and that really needs to change as well. Apartment complexes, landlords, managers, building owners really need to start, allowing pets, and our myths and our stereotypes need to change as well. So many people think shelters are bad places. They blame the shelter for, having to, euthanize pets. They say all the animals in the shelter are, bad or old or sick, behavior problems, certain breeds, all these things that just really aren't true. What the shelters are mostly filled with are sadly animals where, people have, let them down or had situations where they, again, I know some people do drop off older dogs because they can't afford the costs or they don't want to deal with it and things like that. But for the most part, the animals in the shelter are just like everybody's dog or cat in their house,
Yeah, I know. It's really something. It's so strange.
And it's why we focus on then spay and neuter, right? Mm-hmm. Because the hope would be, so we have a clinic today, for example, and it's in East LA today. So our spay and neuter clinics are mobile. They're once a month in East LA, every other month in Pasadena. And we do the Whittier Bell area because that feeds into the Downey shelter, and Downey is a extremely high kill shelter. So we do clinics two to three times a month right now, and they're in areas where we receive funding to reduce the number of animals being born and entering those shelter systems. So why we focus on those areas is that's just where our funders are willing to sort of, support the communities. But why mobile and free and low cost is so important is we're going into areas that are underserved and that don't have the resources. And so making it affordable or free and accessible is really the key. But like this morning, we're in East LA at City Terrace Park, and, we had a person come with a pit bull and 10 puppies. And we've really been working with her on the phone. She originally called us and she was going to give the puppies away. And we said, please let us fix them, let us spay or neuter them before you do that. Let us have you work with a rescue that will place the puppies. So we've really been trying to work with her. And so it was a real delight to have her show up with, the parents as well as all the puppies to get them all fixed.
Wow,
but that's a huge expense. Yeah, bigger dogs have larger litters. So it is not uncommon for sort of what we call blockheads. So, Rottweilers, pit bulls, things like that, to have very large litters, 10 to 13. And so there's a perfect example. That's just one, dog with 13 others, and a breed that is in, real trouble right now. There's a lot of stereotypes with some of these blockheads. I like to call them blockheads instead of bully breeds. They're not bully breeds. They're the, square-headed shaped dogs. And to, be giving those away again. So we fix all these puppies, right? And then if she decides to give them away, we at least know there won't be more, being born.
Right.
But wouldn't it have been nice for the 10 people that she gives them away to, for 10 pit bulls in a shelter to be adopted,
Yeah.
So.
Right, exactly, because there's plenty of them. We had the dog before Shep. Our dog Coco was a Rottweiler, but she was a mix. They weren't really sure. She even had a spot on her tongue that they said might make her Akita.
Or a Chow,
or a Chow.
Yes.
Yeah. And then or Shar-Pei, because she was all wrinkly.
Yeah.
So nobody knew.
Sure.
But if I could teach her how to make beds, she would have been the dog from Peter Pan. She was such a mother hen.
That's
like
so funny.
She was just so mothering. It was nice because I have 4 sons. It was nice to have some more estrogen in the house. And I don't know, she just was, but she was this scary big, she was 90 pounds and she was big and if she barked, yes, and for some reason she thought the UPS guy was coming to kill us.
Sure. They all
this
do.
one,
Yeah.
Shep doesn't seem to care about the UPS.
That's
he
funny.
just cares about the dogs walking by. But no, Coco was like the UPS's guys, and you cannot convince me that he is not coming to kill you. And every time I bark at him, I scare him away. So
he's doing his job
literally every day.
Yes, they think they're absolutely doing their job. They're protecting their family.
And she was funny. We went to the beach one time. One of our famous stories was we had a crazy door at the old house, and it wouldn't shut all the way sometimes. And so we all got in the car, we went to the beach, and I guess something happened and the door didn't shut all the way. So when we came back and pulled into the house, and the door was wide open, and Coco was just standing there, like at the front door, like guarding the door.
Yes.
Like she must have just been at the door the whole time. We were like, what the heck? And we thought, did somebody break in? And we're like, no, the door must have opened, and she just sat there and she just guarded the house while we were gone and made sure nothing happened.
Sure.
And nobody would go in because of her. But
we try to talk to people about that as well, right? There's a lot of people leave their dog outside. They want this sort of guard dog. And the reality is the more you make a pet a part of your family, they're going to guard you much better indoors. And, people are going to stay out of your house if they're in your house and if they're part of your family.
Hear the dog barking and everything. That's an issue too, isn't it? That where they just they'll just chain them up and then have them think that that's they're protecting the house. Yeah.
But that's why it's a perfect example though that actually if you bring them in and make them part of your family, they're going to do that without any training or prompting.
She was fine. She just had she was fine if the person actually came in the house.
Of course, it's just a deterrent. It's a nice deterrent that doesn't.
Yeah, she was great, but she was born on the street. Yeah, and she was rescued by a rescue place, and there were three puppies, and so she was the last one of the 3 puppies that were found on the street. And
it brings up a good point though too, that it's much more important to pick a pet based on your lifestyle and personality and what's going to be the right fit, as opposed to I want what this one looks like, or because the most important thing is that it works, right? You don't want a really active dog if you're a couch potato, or vice versa if you're a real active person, so right. There's again an array of personalities and sizes and breeds, and they all are at shelters and rescues. And that's what we go into schools for. So another one of our programs is humane education. So we work with LA's Best, which is LAUSD's after school and summer programs. And we do kindergarten through 5th grade. And we have volunteer presenters that go in 3 times and basically have lessons that teach kids the importance of adoption, spay and neuter, problem solving, so that when things come up, you can fix them, or who to reach out to if you're struggling. And we teach them about advocacy, that you're never too young to sort of make a difference. So one of the things we have them do is write a letter asking for donations and of material, fabric, so that then they can make toys for the shelter pets. And then we invite them and their families to visit the shelters to bring the toys. So it sort of comes full circle. So that's another way to really, hopefully encourage kids that have pets at home that aren't spayed or neutered. They can come to our clinic, of course, for free. We give out a free certificate. And then if they're ready for a pet or want to get a pet or the next pet maybe, that they would, go to a shelter. If they've never been to a shelter, that they can see a shelter. And then a lot of them will feel sad after, we talk about some things. And so they feel better and empowered by making the toy and knowing that even if they can't deliver it, that it gets delivered to a shelter pet. So it's we're hopefully inspiring and encouraging the next generation maybe to make some different changes, or hopefully help them make them in their home with their families, now.
Oh, that's great. That's great. Opening their eyes to have them see what's going on. So then they're able to bring them in. That's really great. How many animals do you feel, I would imagine you keep track. How many animals do you spay and neuter?
So we currently, at each clinic, our goal is always 35. So we do about 1,000 a year.
Wow, that's great.
Yeah, 1,000 a year. Yeah, because we do, 100-ish a month. And even if we don't have a mobile clinic, so we might get a phone call from a person with like an outdoor cat, and maybe our mobile clinic in their area isn't until next month because we just had it. We certainly don't want kitty that's outside roaming, and especially during kitten season, but really anytime. So we will send them to some of our partnering, what we call standalone or brick and mortar veterinarian clinics to get them in sooner because it might be urgent, or the same with especially an outdoor dog, or maybe you'd be surprised the number of people who call us that have a male and a female living in the home, a boy and girl dog or cat, and neither of them are fixed. Well, we all know what happens when that happens,
right?
So especially in those what we would consider like urgent cases,
right,
we will send them more quickly to an actual, veterinarian office.
Oh, that's
so
great.
In addition to our clinics, and then also our unsheltered people and pet program. So that's homeless people, and we try to help them stay with their pets safely. So I know there's a lot of controversy. Some people think homeless people should not have pets, because they're living, on the street, and that's a choice maybe a person makes, but it's not fair to do that to the animal, or they're not caring for their animal. And that's really a lot of why this program exists, is again, the key is keeping them together safely. So a lot of homeless people won't even go into like emergency housing sheltering because they have a pet and their pet's not allowed. So it's actually, keeping them on the street. So if we can help them get them spayed or neutered, vaccinated, maybe emotional support animal certified, where they can go into housing, it helps get them both off the street. Also, homeless people, for the most part, just like the general public, for the most part, really does care and love their animals. I mean, homeless people will often feed their pets first. I mean, it's a source of all kinds of things. It might keep them off drugs. Exactly. It might keep them, warm. It's certainly a warmth for both of them, sleeping together. It's a protection, all those things. So it's unconditional love. So generally speaking, it's really a wonderful thing. Plus, all these animals, where would they end up? Right?
They just go into the shelter anyway.
Exactly. So why not keep them together, but, keep them together safely? So we do have a pet wellness clinic once a month. We partner with LA Family Housing. And so our goal, we work with the pet, but they work with the people. So we want to make sure the people are getting what they need, and then we can help the pet. So at our pet wellness clinic, we do have a veterinarian there that can, vaccinate, that can deworm, flea treat, trim nails, kind of those basics. And then if they need additional services, so certainly spay and neuter, we take care of emergency surgery. So we did have a dog with a lump that turned out to be cancerous that we had removed. So we really have seen just a tremendous impact with the people we've helped. And our goal, we received a grant from PetSmart Charities for this program, and our commitment was to service 100 homeless people, and we'll double that. We'll end up servicing 200 thanks to donations, because part of the pet wellness clinic, as well as we give out free pet food for dogs and cats, litter, if we get strollers donated, blankets, crates, collars, leashes, and people have been so kind and generous that we haven't had to spend our grant money on those things. Those get donated. So most of that grant money has been spent on veterinarian care, which is really great.
Wow, that's great.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then will you hold, like, what if they went into a shelter where they can't take their animal? Mm-hmm. Do you figure out a way to have the animal taken care of so they can be reunited? Like, say it's like just kind of it's a recent situation and they want to keep their animal. Because I know they have issues with that, with the homeless. If they have a storage facility, like that's usually if somebody goes homeless in kind of one of the scenarios, because I work with a food pantry, mm-hmm. They'll put all their stuff in a storage facility. Gotcha. They can't afford rent, mm-hmm. but they can afford the $200 a month of the storage facility. So they move all their belongings in there. But then if they can't keep that up, mm-hmm. then they lose their storage facility and all their belongings. Yeah. But I would imagine if they went into a homeless shelter, if there was a way to hold the animals until they can get back on their feet and get them back.
So because the population of homeless obviously is growing, but also the population of homeless people with pets is also growing, and it is becoming a big issue. And there's Senator Holtzberg in particular is very focused on it. And so most of the homeless service centers are getting more flexible with the pet situation. And certainly if they're emotional support animal certified, they really, can't turn them away. And then, like I said before, a lot of homeless people just won't even part with their pets. They would rather live on the street kind of thing and wait. What we have been able to do in terms of providing temporary housing for pets, because we just had a gentleman through PATH organization who went into rehab and he had a dog and there was no one. We try to work with the other participants in an organization, because a lot of times we had an issue with a Komodo dragon, actually, one of those giant lizards.
Yikes.
And the owner of that was, I don't remember what happened. I think she had to go in the hospital, if I remember right. And so she had like a roommate in emergency temporary housing that was willing to take care of the Komodo dragon, but the Komodo dragon gets fed fresh like fruits and vegetables. And she's like, I can't afford to do that. And so we paid for, the supplies for the Komodo dragon for the month that was needed. So we can usually work something out. In the other case just recently with PATH organization, the gentleman was going into rehab and there just wasn't anyone. And so his caseworker contacted me and said, is there anything? And I happened to just have a volunteer reach out to me that said, hey, Christy, if you need any part-time fostering, her dog had sadly passed away. And so she could help out. So she took this person's dog in so that he could go into rehab, and they've just were reunited on Wednesday. Oh. Yeah. So we could always use fosters. And actually, even though we are technically not a rescue organization, we inevitably end up with animals for a lot of reasons. Number one, we used to do rescue. Bark Avenue Foundation's we're in our 15th year. And we used to do a ton of actual rescue and transports out of state and things like that. So a lot of animals are microchipped to us because we register the microchip, or a person registers the microchip in their name, of course, but we always leave ourselves on it. Plus, we're the purchasers of it, so it can always be traced back to us. We also provide microchipping with our spay and neuter service. So many animals will link back to us, and we don't ever want to leave a pet that we've serviced. So sadly, sometimes they do end up in the shelter, and we do have to, get them out, of course. And so we partner with other rescues that would, take them and place them. If we have available fosters, we can, it's usually for a short time, but it's why fosters are so valuable. Also, this is kitten season. It's continuing because our weather is so great. And it has been a horrible season. There have been so very many kittens. And so we've helped in some trap and neutering, TNR situations. TNR, if people don't know, it's trap, neuter, and release or return. Mm-hmm. And what you find when you work on large cases, which we are in Burbank, there's probably about 100 cats. There are often babies. And those babies can be placed. You don't want to, turn them back out if they're a couple weeks old, and you don't want to fix the mother while they're still nursing and things like that. So we have ended up with some cats and kittens. So there's always a need for fosters, and they do save lives, and it's usually just temporary.
Right. Mm-hmm. Well, that's really powerful about somebody who goes into rehab, because that would be another thing. If somebody had a problem or whatever, and they wouldn't want to do it because they wouldn't want to abandon, and they're at the end of their tether. So they're like going into rehab, you're at the end of your tether.
Sure.
And to lose your animal,
would be devastating. I mean, it could change everything.
That could send you over. So
absolutely,
the fact that having that animal to care for when you get back and know that you'll have
and
your animal.
I was going to say, and his peace of mind. And I'll tell you, when we set this up, I mean, he wanted to talk to me. He wanted to talk to the foster. He asked if he could have pictures. I mean, this wasn't a person that said, "Oh, great, you found a place for my dog. I'll be back in 30 days."
No, it was probably the last person. Because if he couldn't find anybody to take care of it, then that means that he was at the end of the, people don't understand what rehab is. It's all a big, in Hollywood and everything, everyone kind of makes it like it's a weakness or something, but it's like, it's a real thing. And I've been, one day I'll do a whole podcast episode on Ulysses S. Grant. I've been reading the biography of Ulysses S. Grant, and he was alcoholic, and it was very difficult for him to manage his alcoholism around a lot of people drinking during the Civil War, because everybody drank.
Sure, yeah.
And it's a fascinating book, not just from his life, but it's also about him managing his alcoholism and how he tried to figure out ways to
very
not
public.
drink.
I mean, he was a public figure,
Yeah,
too.
and how it was just so difficult in a time where it was literally looked at as just a weakness, And they really do get to he managed to keep his family and everything else. And it's always amazing the ones that are able to keep their families. But it's when you get down to the point where you're needing to go into somewhere and walk away from your life to get yourself in order. I would imagine that'd be one of the final straws, is that if you had a group that said, "We'll take your animal, we'll watch your animal, and then we'll let you have your animal back." When you're back, it would be like probably some lonely nights. That might be the only thing that's keeping them moving on, is to take care, because that's the first thing you want to do, is to give someone who's alcoholic or something a job or something to be responsible for, so that they can start scraping back up.
Yeah.
And that's beautiful that there's that you also, like, it just seems like you guys are very like non-judgmental, very like, what is it? And we'll figure it out. Like we flexible. Yeah, flexible to try and really meet the need of the people without coming from, from helping the homeless or anything like that. It's just literally, let's see if we can help the person, the animal, the family,
Well, and with the homeless as well, many are seniors. And an animal is so good for a senior.
Yes.
And so we have a particular client that we've had for a couple of years now who does go in and out of the hospital for, physical ailments, surgeries and things like that. And he has a dog named Jigs. And so we've always managed to figure out and help Jigs. Usually it's another participant, it might be a foster. And the last time was very last minute. I mean, I was called at like 3:00, and I mean, it's extremely challenging to get somebody, within a couple hours, but it was urgent. He needed to go to the hospital. There was not another. And so, so his caseworker, called me, and she was willing to transport the dog, and we just put him at a vet. We did boarding, and it was only a couple of days, because that's expensive, right? And we don't generally have a lot of, extra funds for things like that. So, what's really nice is also having those partnerships with the other organizations, so that, okay, we can pay for the boarding, they can do the transport, everybody sort of works together, to make it happen. But I don't think people realize homelessness in terms of how people have gotten there and what their situations are. We have a woman that has had some really medical traumas in her life, and she was an animal rescuer. So she has a lot of animals, and, she brings them, different ones to the clinics all the time. And she just she cries practically every time, she sees us, because she says, you have no idea, the impact and how much you're helping me, because I think a lot of people think, well, they got themselves into it, but it's veterans. It's, just people that have fallen on hard times, come down with something physical, mental. It's such a wide variety.
Yes.
And you can't just take things away. Now, not everything's peaches and roses, obviously. There are some cases, obviously, whether it's homeless people or not homeless people, that really just shouldn't have something to take care of, a pet, a child, those kinds of things. Of course. And of course, if there's, any type of cruelty or, neglect, things like that, then other things have to happen. But we haven't seen that. That's not the norm, for sure.
Right.
For sure.
Right.
And I think people tend to think that.
Well, it's easier to dismiss it. So then you feel like you make that decision and then you don't feel like you have to do anything about it.
Yeah.
So, but that we're really going to have to face it here in Los Angeles. That's for sure.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we've had an hour. Isn't that amazing?
It is.
See, it went fine.
It did. I was nervous.
Oh, no,
I'll admit it.
No, you were great. No, you're great. So just tell us, like, I'm going to put up the donation. I put the donation.
Oh, thank you.
I did a donation link on Instagram, which was kind of cool. I didn't know I could do that.
Cool.
Instagram is just you learn something new every day. So I found a button, so you can go on my Instagram in the story and find the button. And if you want to donate directly, we're doing an event.
We are.
I'll put the invite on the on my Facebook page and on my Instagram. The invite I have already, I think, pretty sure, but I'll repost that. And then all the proceeds from that, we're going to do the Arbonne Holiday
Which is
line.
so generous.
And so this was the event I was going to in the afternoon after I had my disastrous
fall with your hands.
Fall with my wrist. I was texting Christy from the emergency room going, you're going to have to cancel the event. I couldn't believe it. I just still can't believe it. It's still like, I wish I could just wash that day away, but then my wrist hurts and I go, oh yeah, that's right. You tripped, so dumb. Anyway,
it all worked out though. We have even more people coming,
I know.
And you were generous to donate even before.
Yeah, and I had people donate on my webpage that day, and I'll do that again if anybody orders anything and feels strongly about it. If you go on my website and you order something on Sunday, I'll take every order that I get in on Sunday, and we'll put it toward the number. But yeah, I'm really looking forward to it. We'll have our holiday line, which is really beautiful.
Wonderful.
And so that'll be exciting. And so if you want to do some of your holiday shopping and help Bark Avenue Foundation, that'd be great. And then how else? They can just go on your website and donate.
They can go to our website, barkavenuefoundation.org, for sure. We have an event next weekend. We're participating in Strut Your Mutt. And so that's a walk over at USC. And so if you go to our website, I think the registration fee is $15. You can be a part of our team and walk and raise money to help as well. So that's a lot of fun. So if you wanted to meet any of the rest of the volunteers or
be a volunteer.
We all foster volunteer
cool
donation,
idea.
Any kind of support is tremendously helpful. Even if, there's plenty to do right from your home. Like, I'm not great at Instagram, or just spreading the word on social media, is a tremendous help.
Mm-hmm.
So anything anyone can do really does make a big impact,
Mm-hmm.
So we can always use food for the homeless, pet food for the homeless. So, dog food, cat food, pet medication, flea medication, not pet medication, but flea medication, things like that, because we really try to get those donated so we can just, like I said, save the funding for the actual veterinary costs of spay and neuter and things like that.
Yeah. We have in my food pantry, we do animal
Oh, that's
food
great.
Also.
Yeah.
So now they have they give out, I think we're up to 600 bags a week.
Wow.
Of food.
That's tremendous.
Yeah.
And that just shows the need.
Just out of Studio City. Then I think that's part of the North Hollywood population, the one in the North Hollywood Park. And
that's good to know.
Our church also feeds them once a month. They go and they make a home cooked meal and play music for them and everything like that. It's really nice. That's become a thing that's been at least, I think that's been going on like 5-6 years.
But all those things make a difference, right? Yeah. So volunteering to make food and food. Yeah, all those things.
Feed the animals too. So yeah, it's really a complicated situation. And I think the more we have to really face it. The only way we're going to be able to help them is we have to really face it and understand that it's complicated. We've got to drop the judgmental, and we have to really just take it as a case by case and really help our fellow citizens, because it's big, and it's bigger than just you need to take care of a government, or you need to, we really have to take responsibility for our own, our own city and see what we can do. Absolutely. So this was great. This was wonderful. All right. So, so thanks everybody for tuning in, and I hope you learned something, and I hope you can donate, or you can come by on Sunday and to our event, or if you can donate. And I'd love to have Christy back, because this would be fun if there's anything ever coming up or anything like that. But I'm really impressed. I think it's a beautiful thing you're doing, and look at what you must have helped, one, with all your rescuing, and then just now taking on to the homeless, and then the education. I think that's great. And I think I'm going to try and think of things that I can suggest to you, especially for the education with the children, because I think that would be a fun thing for you to, even visiting with the youth group of my church or Boys and Girls Club. I would love it. Might be a good like part too, because I think that's a good way to get to them too, is through the children, because the children are very woke now. Kids Absolutely. Really want to make a difference. And they're the future, right? Yeah, we're going to need them. They take it very seriously, and it's really lovely to see. It is. So anyway, so thanks so much. Thank you so much, Sally. All right, everybody. So I am going to just log off, because I think that was good. We were at hour and 5. So thanks everybody. And next week I have my my Instagram friend Brianna Simpson, and she has her own podcast, and we are going to talk grief. So that'll be my once a month focusing on our grief series. So if there's anybody that you can think of that she has a beautiful podcast with, she's a wonderful writer, and so she's just really insightful. And so I'm really looking forward to having her on. She's going to be via Skype, because I think she lives back east. It's so funny. On Instagram, you don't know where anybody lives. So that's going to be my first Instagram guest. So thanks everybody for tuning in, and I will see you next. I'll talk to you next week. Okay, bye-bye.